Hello, and today we got Daniel Gray, Middlesbrough fan and football author for Saturday 3 p.m. and Nutmeg. How are you doing today, Daniel?
I'm all right, thank you. I'm very impressed with your studio, Angus, and the lovely hearts top behind you I can see there.
Thank you very much. So, what's your first memory in playing football, if you
Of,
played?
pl- of playing football, yeah, I played every day. My very first memory would be like so many kids out in my street, which was a cul-de-sac, and we played up against these conifer bushes, which were our goals. With the other goals at the other end were a lamppost and a grit box. And those endless special games that went on for hours with no scores really kept, that only ended when your mum called you in for tea. And it was just my life, really, playing early on. Sausage and chips and playing football was just about my life as a kid, I think.
Pretty similar for me. What is your first memory of watching football?
Certainly on the TV, I can remember watching an FA Cup final between Liverpool and Everton and then doing that classic thing of going outside to try and recreate what we saw. But going to football, I vividly remember my first match, which was in December of 1988. I was just about to turn 7 and I went to the Holgate End at Ayresome Park, Middlesbrough. I remember going up the steps with my dad. I remember sitting on him, putting me on the red crush barrier and this vast emerald green pitch in front of me. It was a dark winter's day and Middlesbrough drew 3-3 with Aston Villa. And I have to say, in the classic cliched way, I've never stopped going. I've never really stopped loving it, apart from, of course, when we lose.
But like us all, what's the
Yeah.
best stadium you've been to?
Oh, well, I really love old-fashioned grounds. So it'd be somewhere like Greenock Morton's Capello or Somerset Park of Ayr, because I love Scottish football, as you know, Angus. So it's probably an old-fashioned ground like that. But in terms of a big, exciting stadium, I was at the UEFA Cup final to watch Middlesbrough, which feels like a million years ago, but it was only about 12 years ago in Eindhoven. So it was PSV Stadium. It was big, it was tight, it was loud. The Sevilla fans were just brilliant. We were loud as well. And what an experience. We lost 4-0, but to see your team in a place like that is something magical.
I've been there too. The corners are just quite funny. It's quite good.
Yeah, true, true.
What's the worst stadium you've been to?
I suppose it would be sort of identikit modern stadium. You don't want to name too many names, but you can imagine. I don't really love the out of town grounds that have 4 sides all the same, that are really in the middle of nowhere and don't have too much personality yet. Albeit Middlesbrough moved to something that could be described a bit like that. So of course, if it's your own ground, you love it, but it would be something along those lines without naming names.
Fair enough. What's the best kit you've seen?
I think I'm biased, obviously, so the best kit for me was before I was born. I absolutely loved the 1970s Middlesbrough shirt, which had this white band through the middle when Jack Charlton was manager of Middlesbrough. I had the Toffs replica that I wore for years, and I was jealous that I never got to see them playing in that. So stylish and simple. I think all kits before sponsors were a lot better, really.
Yeah, Hearts had one like that in 2014-15 to commemorate the war. I
Yeah,
really like that kit.
yeah,
That's probably my favourite Hearts kit.
yeah, the simplicity of it.
So from best to worst, what's the worst kit you've seen?
There was this phase in the 90s of its goalkeeper shirts in particular that was so loud and awful. I remember Sunderland's was particularly bad. That's not even a rivalry thing. They were just, I just don't know what designers were thinking. They went suddenly from being plain green or even, well, it's usually green actually, the odd blue one, to just having so many different patterns on them. They look like sort of curtains from Argos from a teenage boy's room or something. They were just completely hideous. So it would be a particular genre of 90s goalkeeper shirts.
What's the best game you've been to?
Oh, that's so hard. It has to be, though, when Middlesbrough came back from being 1-0 in the first leg against Steaua Bucharest, then 2-0 down against Steaua Bucharest in the second leg at the Riverside, and we won 4-2 with the 4th goal coming in the 83rd or 85th minute. And to be able to be dead and buried like that and come back in the semi-final of a European competition, I'll never see a game again like that. The fact that Gareth Southgate, our brilliant captain, went off injured, Steve McLaren, who was such a conservative manager, pretty much played 5 or 6 up front like a 1950s team. It was just wave after wave of attack, and Stuart Downing in particular was majestic. He was like one of these footballers that your granddad would tell you about, playing in that old way of hugging the touchline, whipping the balls in. When the winner went in, just I must have landed 4 or 5 rows away from my dad with the bruises on my shins. I'm sure they're still there now. Just incredible.
What's the best boots you've seen or wore?
Oh, you've got classics behind you, I can see in the
Yep.
Adidas one. But mine would have been Puma Kings, which were too expensive at the time in the early 90s when I was a kid. But at the end of the season, our local sports shop always had a sale, and I'd stretched and bargained with my dad for his budget to stretch to them, and they were about 35 or 40 quid, which was a fortune, and I just loved them. Gaza had them playing for England, and they were my favourite boots by a mile. I always wanted some Predators, but they were 120 quid, so I didn't know a single kid with them.
Right, so let's move on to Saturday 3 p.m. When did you first come up with the idea of writing that book?
Oh, well, I was in a pub in Durham, a Wetherspoons pub, with my wife and my little girl, which sounds quite bad. But to entertain my little girl, they had this old bookshelf full of old books, and I would say to her, pick Daddy a blue book, pick Daddy a red book. And this blue book she bought me was by a guy called JB Priestley. He's an author that died in the early 1980s, but I've always loved Priestley's work. He wrote some lovely things about football, actually. He was from Bradford. And this book was called Delight. And so it was about 120 little pieces about things in life that still delighted him. They were very much of the time, just after the war, like smoking a pipe in bed and things like that. But I started to think on the way home on the train back to Edinburgh, does football still delight me? Could I write little essays like this about what delights me about football? And so I wrote a list on the train back on the East Coast Main Line. And I thought, it does still delight me, even when it upsets me and the money in it annoys me sometimes. And so I put that to a publisher as an idea, and publishers often like list-based ideas because they tend to sell well as gift books. I wrote a few experimental chapters and they loved the style. So that was where it all came from, the chance find of that book in a pub. Otherwise, I wouldn't have written now 4 books in that style, because there's another one coming out in October.
Look forward to that. What was the last game you were at?
The last game I was at Hibs against Dundee United in the Cup. Brilliant game, 4-2, I think. Some of the most vivid colours in football, I think, Hibs and Dundee United, green and orange, which was also the first Scottish game I ever saw when I was about 14 years old. And before that, I'm glad that was my last one, because before that it was Middlesbrough 0, Luton Town 1 on a miserably cold day in the Riverside.
And just finally, to end on, what was the last time you paid for a ticket to a football match, or was it the Hibs Dundee United?
Oh yes, I don't. The only comps I've had as such has been on reporting on Scottish Cup games for Scotland on Sunday, where the clubs are kind enough to let you in there, and then I've had the odd gift from clubs occasionally, but usually, yeah, I know all the prices and I'm paying my way.
Fair enough. Right, Daniel, it's been a pleasure having you on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good luck with it, Angus.
Thank you.